My name is Sabrina Miller. I'm 28 years old, and for as long as I can remember, cars have been the one thing that gave me purpose, joy, and a sense of belonging. While other little girls were dreaming of ballet recitals or picking out dresses for prom, I was the one who'd come home with grease under my fingernails after spending Saturdays in my grandfather's garage. He taught me that cars weren't just machines. They were stories written in steel, fire, and chrome. And my story, my pain, my betrayal, and eventually my triumph, all began with a car. Not just any car, but my dream car. A 1969 Corvette Stingray, rally red, polished so fine the sunlight danced across its curves like liquid fire. I worked 70-hour weeks for 5 years straight to afford it. I sacrificed nights out, vacations, clothes, and comfort. Every extra cent went into a savings account labeled with one word: Corvette. But when I came home from a business trip one summer, exhausted but exhilarated from closing the biggest deal of my career, I discovered something that shattered me to my core. My car, my dream, my connection to my grandfather, my blood and sweat and sacrifice was gone. Sold. And not by thieves in the night, not by strangers lurking in shadows, but by my own parents. When I confronted my mother, she sneered, as if I was the foolish one. "Thanks to your car, our daughter is having the time of her life." She meant my sister, Heather. And in that moment, something inside me broke. I laughed, not because it was funny, but because the sound kept me from screaming. My mom snapped at me, demanding to know what was so amusing. The truth was, I wasn't amused. I was horrified, because my family had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. But before I tell you what I did, what they faced, and how everything came full circle, let me take you back. Let me tell you how we got here. Because betrayal like this doesn't come out of nowhere. It festers over years, hidden under small cuts, favoritism, dismissals, and choices that teach you over and over again: you are less worthy than the golden child. For me, that golden child was Heather. When you grow up in a house with two sets of rules, you learn to measure love by what isn't said out loud. In mine, the quiet rule was simple: Heather needed cushioning. I could absorb the fall. If there was a hard truth to deliver, it came to me unwrapped, blunt-edged, and practical. If there was a soft lie to hand out, it was stitched into Heather's pillows. At 7 years old, I didn't have words for it. I only had the way my mother's eyes softened when Heather cried over a scuffed shoe and hardened when I tracked in a stripe of motor oil on the heel of my sneaker after spending the morning at my grandfather's garage. My grandfather, everyone called him Walt, but to me he was Pop, kept a kingdom of metal and patience behind a roll-up door that shrieked like a gull when he tugged the cord. The garage smelled like old coffee, gasoline, and the sweet metallic tang of cut steel. He'd slide a stool up to the workbench just for me, set a carburetor in the pool of light under the gooseneck lamp, and show me how the float worked like a tiny promise. "Machinery doesn't lie, Bree," he'd say. "It does exactly what it's told, by design or by neglect. You treat it right, it returns the favor." There was a red Stingray poster tacked above the pegboard, edges curled from heat. Some nights I'd fall asleep imagining the reflections on that paint. The way it must have felt to see your face rippled across it like water. Heather's sanctuary wasn't the garage. It was the bright front room where Mom kept the good chairs, the pale carpet, and a row of ballet shoes lined up like sleeping birds. If I leaned against the doorway to watch, I'd get a soft, corrective cough from Mom and a pointed look at my hands. "Wash up," she'd say, even if they were already clean. "And don't lean on the trim, you'll scuff it." Then she'd push the coffee table back and turn up the little portable speaker and count 5, 6, 7, 8. As Heather moved with an earnest delicacy that made adults say things like poised and precious. At dinner, my father would ask Heather what new steps she'd learned and ask me if Pop had told me again that cars have souls. His voice always had a laugh tucked inside it, like I was supposed to agree the idea was ridiculous. I learned to make myself useful. I could gap a spark plug, replace a hose clamp, trace an intermittent short by feel, and by 12 I could field strip a lawnmower carb with a butter knife when Pop's sockets went missing behind the old vise. At school, Mr. Ramirez, the shop teacher who still wore his army haircut, would hold up my projects and say, "Sabrina's welds look like they know where they're going." The counselor suggested I join an after-school program in robotics. Mom said the schedule collided with Heather's rehearsals and weekends would be better spent supporting your sister's big dreams. When I pointed out that mine were big too, Mom smiled the way you smile at an imaginative but misinformed child. "Cars aren't a future, honey. They're a hobby." Heather could dance professionally. On my 14th birthday, Mom hosted a girls' day for Heather and some cousins at a salon that smelled like dryer sheets and acetone. She pressed a 20 into my palm and told me to get something age-appropriate. I thanked her and crossed the strip mall to Nestor's Auto, where the owner kept a cardboard box of grease-stiffened manuals by the door. I bought a beat-up Haynes for a '69 Corvette and spent the afternoon on Pop's workbench, turning pages already smudged by other hands and tracing diagrams with a reverent finger. When Pop found me there, he lifted the book like it was a family Bible and whistled low. "That one's harder than it looks," he said. "But it'll teach you the difference between a dream and a plan." I think that was the first time I realized I wasn't just pretending to be a mechanic in training. I was authoring a future no one else in our household would write for me. Favoritism is a slow leak. You don't hear it at first. You just notice you're always a little short. Heather's 16th birthday involved a rented hall, fairy lights, a cake that could have fed a minor battalion, and a small ceremony where Dad jingled keys and presented a glossy compact car with a bow like something from a sitcom. Mine had been a sheet cake at home with a gold plastic 16 stuck crooked in the frosting. "We didn't want to set expectations," Dad said when I asked, genuinely, not angrily, why the scale felt so different. "We're doing better financially now," Mom added, which was always the explanation when money flowed one way and not the other. "And besides, you don't even have time to drive. You're always at the garage." There are answers that sound like reasons but function like closures. That was one. Senior year, a guidance counselor printed a scholarship list for me and underlined the STEM ones. I worked a breakfast shift at a diner from 5 to 8, hustled to school, then stocked at a hardware store after practice hours most days. When the scholarship letters came and then the acceptance notices, Mom held one by the corner as if the ink might smudge and said, "Finance. Are you sure? You're so hands-on." Dad said finance was fine if I wanted a marketable career. They said it like a compromise, as if I'd wanted to juggle chainsaws for a living. Heather got into a dance program in state. There were congratulatory toasts and a shopping trip for new clothes. I got a used laptop and a serious talk about loans. "We'll help where we can," Dad promised, and I nodded because he wanted me to believe him. But in our house, help wasn't an equal verb. It curved toward the person who needed less and wanted more. Pop came to my high school graduation wearing his good hat and boots polished with elbow grease. After, he pulled me aside and pressed something small and heavy into my palm. An old chrome keychain stamped with a cross flag's emblem. Not a key, just the emblem. "Your grandma wouldn't let me keep the car," he said with a grin that told me the battle had been worth fighting even if he'd lost it. "But I kept a bit of its name. Keep this until you've got the real thing." He was gone 2 years later, a fall at the shop, quick and unfair. At his funeral, someone played "Every Day I Have the Blues," in a version Pop would have hated. After, I sat alone on the back step, the grass yellow and brittle, and turned that emblem over in my hand until the corners left a mark in my skin. "Build something that can't be taken," he'd written in a note I found tucked into the pocket of my jacket later. I didn't know then how literal the warning was. Chicago after college was a different kind of schooling. I learned that the fluorescent lights in the office always hummed at a particular frequency after midnight. I learned how to keep a face that didn't betray fatigue during morning status calls, how to read a portfolio like a mechanic reads an engine bay, and how to say "we" when I was the honest pronoun. I built a spreadsheet at home labeled Stingray, yes, in caps, and every time I moved money into the high-yield account I logged it. Rent, split with 2 roommates. Food, rice and eggs and whatever vegetables were cheap. Clothes, timeless, durable, neutral. Entertainment, free or the kind that fit into a walk at dusk. A friend from the firm asked me once why I didn't enjoy my 20s more. I told her I was enjoying the future in advance. The family text thread still popped like popcorn, mostly Heather's updates and Mom's commentary. When Heather's car needed new tires, Mom posted a photo of the receipt with a caption that read, "We," in a way that meant, "We, your parents, took care of it." When my savings hit a number I'd never seen in my account before, I didn't post a screenshot. When Dad needed help with a surprise property tax assessment, he called me and began the conversation with, "I hate to ask." I transferred the money without a lecture, and when I saw on Instagram that Heather had new highlights the following week, I swallowed the understanding that money in our family had a way of traveling like a well-trained dog, always toward the hand that patted, never toward the one that worked. In year 4 at the firm, I met James at a classic car meet under the L tracks where the shadows made every car look like it had something to confess. He was leaning into the engine bay of a replica Stingray, adjusting the timing with a patience I recognized like a reflection. "You're off by a hair," I said, and he glanced up, not offended, and handed me the light. We talked about the heartbreak of searching auctions and forums, about the difference between an original and a dream rebuilt from donor parts, about the kind of people who think a car is a status symbol versus the kind who think it's a form of prayer. He didn't flinch when I said my grandfather had taught me to listen for misfires the way you listen for somebody telling you they're not okay before they say the actual words. He listened like I was the engine. The day I found her, the car, not an approximation, not a close enough, was a still October afternoon. The seller had a barn outside Kenosha, a tidy portfolio of paperwork, and the kind of voice that tried out prices like descriptions. I drove her once around the property, barely breathed on the throttle, and felt Pop's hand on my shoulder the way you feel your own heartbeat when you lay your head down in the quiet. I wired every dollar I'd saved. I signed more slowly than I've ever signed my name. When I parked her in my spot that night and stood at the curb to look back, I cried, which is not a dramatic thing to confess. It was relief. A vow kept. Something built that couldn't be taken. Mom said the car was cute the first time she saw it in person. A word that felt like a paper cut on velvet. Dad circled it with a cautious awe and asked what the insurance cost like. There might be a number that justified his distance from pride. Heather posed against the fender for a photo she captioned "My sister's midlife crisis," which I laughed at because it was easier. You learn to manage your own joy the way you manage idle speed. Steady, quiet, don't flood it. If this were a tidy morality play, the lesson would have landed then. It didn't. The old habits kept circling. Mom would borrow my time or my muscle with the expectation of a yes, then marvel when I negotiated a boundary. She asked once if I could co-sign a lease for Heather, just for the first year. I said no and braced for disappointment. It came dressed as concern. "You don't want to be alone forever, do you?" she said, as if my refusal to subsidize irresponsibility was the same as rejecting love. The next week, Heather posted photos from a weekend in Miami. I changed the passwords on my accounts, not because anyone had asked for them, but because I finally believed my own rule. Protect what has no backup. When Veronica called me into her office and asked about my Japanese, I thought she was joking. It had been college-level classes and a semester abroad, enough to order food without embarrassing myself and to apologize gracefully when I did. But she was serious, and then everything was serious. 3 weeks in Tokyo, point position on a pitch that could push our team up a rung I hadn't dared name out loud. On the train home that night, I stared at my reflection in the window and didn't recognize the version of me who was about to step into a conference room 20 floors above Shinjuku, and be the person people looked at when they wanted yes turned into yes please. I should have rented a storage unit for the car. Or I should have asked a colleague with a suburb-safe garage. Or I should have done what my gut whispered the second I pictured Mom's face when I explained I'd be gone for 3 weeks. Don't involve them at all. But the neighborhood where I lived had seen a rash of break-ins, and Mom and Dad's garage was dry, clean, and quiet. Dad had nodded at my list with that stubborn pride men wear when they refused to put on their reading glasses. "I know how to baby a machine," he said. "You forget who taught your pop how to back a trailer?" He hadn't. And James had the replica, a near twin from 20 feet away. It seemed like a perfect extra layer of security to swap the cars while I was gone. James could tuck the real Stingray into his climate-controlled garage. My parents could babysit a car that looked like the one they knew without the risk I couldn't forgive. I told myself it was a test of trust that would pass. I told myself that Mom's habit of overstepping was a social thing, not a legal one, and that Dad's soft-spoken compromises still stopped short of harm. I told myself family, complicated as it was, would protect what I valued if I was clear and careful and specific, and I was all three. I wrote out instructions. I covered the car myself. I took a photo of the odometer and texted it to Dad with a smiling emoji I didn't feel, because I wanted the message to be love, not fear. I kissed Mom's cheek as she fussed with my travel scarf, and told me to adjust my sleep cycle on the flight. I hugged Dad harder than usual when he walked me to the driveway, and tried not to notice the way his eyes lingered on the car like a man measuring what he can't afford. At the curb at O'Hare, I pressed my palm against the cool metal of my suitcase and watched James slip into traffic with the replica behind me and the real thing already safe in his garage, and I believed, for a moment that now hurts to remember, that I'd threaded the needle. I believed I'd honored Pop's edict. I believed that what I had built couldn't be taken. I was wrong, of course, not about the car but about something more delicate. I was wrong about the difference between a boundary explained and a boundary respected. I was wrong about the way need bends ethics when it's been trained for years to recognize generosity as a rule rather than a choice. I took a direct flight, slept in the small shallow way you sleep when you're not in charge of anything, and woke up under a pale Tokyo morning with the fragile relief of a plan that seemed to hold. I sent a good morning text to the family thread, a love you to James, a photo of the view out my hotel window to Mom because she likes concrete evidence of your happiness. She sent back 3 hearts and a warning about jet lag and a reminder to drink green tea. Dad sent a thumbs up. Heather didn't respond. She rarely did unless there was a stage. There are choices you examine forever later, from every angle like accident scene photographs. Leaving the car with them was one. Swapping it with James was another. But the choice I measure by finger widths even now is the one I made every time Mom or Dad crossed a line and I told myself their intent softened the impact. Intent matters, but outcomes matter more. By the time I understood that fully, a man in Indiana had cash-wired $50,000 to a couple who believed they were doing the right thing for their favorite daughter. Heather was standing on a cruise ship deck with a drink she didn't pay for, and my mother had discovered how quickly a boundary dissolves when you call it love and push. When the plane brought me back to Chicago 3 weeks later, I wanted 2 things more than sleep. A long drive along the lake in my car and Thai takeout with James on his couch. The taxi pulled into my parents' driveway, the garage door was up, and there was a hole where a red car should have been. Maybe they moved it. I told myself out loud like narration would make it true. I rolled my suitcase past the azaleas Mom fussed over like a second child. I smoothed my hair because she notices. I knocked even though it's my family home, because I wanted this to start politely. Welcome home, Mom said, and her hug felt like a curtain. How was your flight? I stepped back and asked the only question that mattered. Where's my car? Mom's mouth made a shape that wasn't an answer. Dad folded his newspaper like there was any information on the page that could save him. In the hallway mirror I caught my own face, the face of a woman who had built something she thought couldn't be taken, and I saw the smallest crack. I wish I could tell you I left when she said what she said. I wish I could tell you I didn't feel that old familiar tilt in the room, the one where a decision had already been made and I was the last to get the memo. Thanks to your car, my mother said brightly. Our daughter is having the time of her life. And just like that, a lifetime of small leaks became the sound of something bursting. The silence that followed my mother's words felt like standing inside a cathedral just after the organ cuts out. Air heavy, heart pounding, everything reverberating too loud inside my chest. My car. Sold. My dream, my grandfather's legacy, the very symbol of my sacrifice and independence. Gone, because my parents decided my sister deserved a vacation. First, I didn't scream. I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because my body had no other way to release the surge of disbelief crashing through me. The sound startled even me. It was jagged, hollow, the kind of laugh you hear from people who've been pushed too far. What's so funny? My mother snapped, her face tightening like she had caught me being ungrateful instead of betrayed. You. I could barely form words. You sold my car? For Heather's cruise. Don't be dramatic, Sabrina, Mom said, waving her hand like I was overreacting to spilled milk. It's just a car. You make good money. You can buy another one. But Heather, this was her chance. All her friends were going. Do you know how devastating it would have been for her to miss it? Her voice was sharp, righteous, even like she was lecturing me on compassion. I turned to Dad, desperate for some anchor of reason. Tell me this isn't real. Tell me you didn't go along with this. Dad set the newspaper down with a heavy sigh. Try to understand, Bree. Heather has been struggling. Work stress, her boss riding her hard. This cruise is therapeutic for her. Therapeutic. I spat. You stole my car for a vacation. Mom bristled, her chin lifting the way it always did when she was preparing to defend the indefensible. We didn't steal. We simply facilitated a solution. The buyer paid us a fair price, and Heather got the chance she needed. Family helps family. I stared at her, feeling like the floor had given out beneath me. Do you hear yourself? You forged my name. You sold something that wasn't yours. That's not helping family. That's fraud. You're overreacting, Mom insisted. Besides, you're the strong one. You've always been strong. Heather's sensitive, Sabrina. She needs more support. That line, the strong one, was their favorite justification. It meant I could be overlooked, denied, sacrificed. Because I would survive it. Because Heather couldn't. I felt rage clawing at the inside of my throat. How much? I asked, my voice shaking with the effort to stay controlled. They exchanged a glance. Dad cleared his throat. 50,000. The laugh this time tore out of me like glass. 50? That car was worth 85. Do you have any idea what you sold? Did you even bother to research it? The buyer said it was fair, Dad muttered. The buyer conned you because you didn't know the difference between a replica and a real classic. I snapped. And then, as if fate wanted to underline my words, my phone buzzed. A text from James just pulled up. Where's the Stingray? In the haze of shock and fury, a memory surfaced. James and I swapping the cars before my trip. My heart jolted, and then slowly, a dangerous calm began to settle over me. I turned back to my parents, who were watching me like cornered animals. My mother's face was flushed with defensive indignation, my father's pale with dawning dread. And suddenly I laughed again. But this time it was different. It wasn't broken or frantic. It was cold. You really don't know what you've done, do you? I said softly. What do you mean? Dad asked, his voice wavering. I straightened, meeting their eyes with steady composure. You didn't sell my car. Confusion washed over them. What? Mom snapped. Of course we did. We saw you drive it here, Sabrina. Don't lie. I walked to the door, opened it, and gestured for James to come inside. He entered, glancing between my tense expression and my parents' bewildered ones. Mom, Dad, I said with deliberate calm. Meet James, the owner of the car you just sold. The color drained from their faces instantly. James crossed his arms, his voice cool and clipped. That wasn't Sabrina's Corvette you sold. That was my replica. Built in 2004 to look like the original. Worth maybe 30 grand on a good day. The real one, Sabrina's, is safe in my garage untouched. The silence that followed was absolute. My mother's knees seemed to buckle, and she collapsed into a chair. Oh my God, she whispered. What have we done? Dad's face went ashen. But it looked exactly like hers. That was the point, James said flatly. To protect the real car while she was gone. But you two? You forged documents. You took money for a car that wasn't yours. You committed auto theft, fraud, maybe even wire fraud if the buyer paid electronically. That's not just family helping family. That's a felony. My parents stared at us, horror dawning in their eyes. And for the first time in my life, the balance of power shifted. They weren't the ones holding judgment over me anymore. They weren't the ones dismissing my feelings or telling me I was strong enough to endure. They were the ones staring down the barrel of consequences they had never even imagined. I crossed my arms, my voice as steady as I could make it. Congratulations, Mom. Congratulations, Dad. You didn't just betray me. You committed crimes. And now you're going to find out what it feels like when there's no bailout, no excuses, no golden child to hide behind. The phone in my hand buzzed again. An unknown number flashed on the screen. Is this Sabrina Miller? A man's voice asked when I answered. Yes, I said cautiously. This is Peter Donovan. I recently purchased a 1969 Corvette Stingray from your parents, on your behalf. There's a problem with the title transfer. I looked up at my parents, who were watching me with naked terror. And in that moment, I knew the reckoning had only just begun. The name, Peter Donovan, settled in my mind like a stone hitting still water, ripples spreading in every direction. The buyer, the man who thought he had bought my Stingray, but in reality, had been handed James's replica wrapped in forged documents. My parents' terrified expressions told me all I needed to know. They hadn't anticipated this part. They thought they could get away with it. They thought no one would ever find out. I ended the call with a measured promise. Mr. Donovan, let me call you back within the hour. There's a misunderstanding we need to straighten out. My voice was calm, professional, the same tone I used in high-stakes meetings at the firm. But inside, my pulse hammered like a drumline. When I set the phone down, Mom's voice cracked, high-pitched with panic. "You have to help us, Sabrina. Please, you can't let this go to the police. We'll go to jail." I raised an eyebrow, my fury sharpening into something lethal. "You should have thought of that before you sold something that didn't belong to you." "It was a mistake," Dad stammered. "We thought we were helping Heather." I cut him off. "Helping Heather? By stealing James's car? By forging my name? By committing fraud? No, you weren't helping Heather. You were enabling her. Again. And this time, you dragged yourselves into felony territory." Mom clasped her hands together like she was praying. "We didn't know it wasn't your car. You tricked us." "I didn't trick you," I said coldly. "I protected myself. Because on some level I knew I couldn't trust you." James stepped forward then, his presence grounding me. His voice was calm but edged with steel. "Ignorance isn't a legal defense. What you did is still auto theft. And yes, over $30,000 in value makes it a felony in Illinois. Add the forged documents? That's forgery and wire fraud too. You're looking at prison time. Up to 15 years. The room seemed to shrink around us. Mom sobbed loudly, the theatrical kind of wailing she usually used to manipulate sympathy. But this time the sound didn't move me. It just grated. Dad pressed his hands to his face, muttering, "What have we done? What have we done?" I folded my arms, my voice like ice. "What you've done is betray me. Again. Only this time you didn't just hurt me. You broke the law. And now the buyer is calling because the title doesn't match. Do you have any idea how bad this looks? You didn't just betray your daughter. You defrauded an innocent man." The silence was suffocating. James broke it with a clipped question. "Who exactly did you sell it to? I need every detail. Name, contact, payment method, everything." Dad fumbled for his phone, his hands trembling. He pulled up an email chain, then a scanned contract. James took the phone, scrolling, his jaw tightening with each line he read. Fake bill of sale. VIN number doesn't match the car. Forged signature. This is a mess. Mom's sobs grew louder, almost frantic. "We don't know anything about VIN numbers. We just thought." "You thought wrong," I snapped. "And you did it on purpose. You knew if you waited until I came back I'd stop you. So you rushed it. You knew what you were doing." They didn't deny it. And that, more than anything, told me the truth. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Heather this time. An Instagram post of her on a deck chair, cocktail in hand, captioned "Living my best life." The Mediterranean sun gleamed off her sunglasses as if mocking me. Rage coiled in my chest. "Look at this," I said, shoving the screen in my parents' faces. "While you two are sitting here begging me not to let you rot in prison, she's sipping cocktails on a luxury cruise. Does this look like someone suffering from depression? Or someone struggling at work? Or does it look like someone who manipulated you into believing she deserved a vacation at my expense?" Mom tried to defend her. "She needed this. You don't understand." "No, Mom," I said, my voice deadly calm. "What I understand is that you've spent 24 years excusing Heather's behavior. And now you've crossed the line from bad parenting into criminal conspiracy. And the worst part? You still don't get it." Dad finally broke, his voice raw. "Then what do you want us to do?" I stared at them, cold and unblinking. "You're going to face this. You're going to call Mr. Donovan with me. And you're going to admit exactly what you did. You're going to fix the mess you created. And then you're going to pay James back every penny. Because this isn't just about me anymore. It's about the damage you did to him." Mom looked horrified. "But we don't have that kind of money." "Then figure it out," James said flatly. "Home equity loan. Sell something. Downsize. Because until you pay me back, this doesn't go away." Dad swallowed hard. You wouldn't really press charges against your own parents, would you?" I met his eyes. "Try me." The weight of my words hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. For the first time in my life, I saw fear in my parents' eyes. Not fear of losing Heather's approval, not fear of social embarrassment, but real fear. Fear of consequences. Fear of me. And in that moment I realized they had underestimated me for the last time. When I finally stepped outside, The cool air hit me like a reset button. James followed close behind, his jaw tight, his hand brushing mine in silent solidarity. We stood in the driveway, where my real stingray should have been gleaming like a jewel but wasn't, and for the first time since landing, I allowed myself to exhale. James leaned against his sedan, arms crossed. We can press charges. Sabrina, we'd win. This isn't just some family squabble anymore. This is fraud, theft, forgery, the whole package. I rubbed my temples, exhaustion and fury warring inside me. I don't want my parents in jail, James. But I also don't want them walking away from this like it's just another family misunderstanding. They need to feel the consequences. They need to get it. He studied me, his eyes softer now. Then we need leverage. Real leverage. And luckily we have it. They didn't sell your Corvette, they sold mine. Which means it's not even about you anymore. This is my property. My rights. If I file charges, the state has to take it seriously. I met his gaze, the reality of that sinking in. So what do? First, we get the buyer back on our side. Then we put the responsibility exactly where it belongs, on them. Before I could reply, my phone buzzed again. This time a new text from Heather. You'd love this sunset, Bree. Wish you were here, hugs and kisses. She had no idea. No idea she was lounging on a deck chair while our parents were unraveling everything back home. I showed James the message, my lip curling. She's oblivious. Totally oblivious. James's voice hardened. Then she needs to stop being oblivious. Because whether she asked them outright or not, she's the reason they did this. And she doesn't get to sip martinis while everyone else pays the bill. I nodded, adrenaline thrumming again. You're right. It's time she came home. Inside, my parents were huddled over Dad's phone, pale and frantic. Mom looked up as I entered, her face streaked with mascara. Did you talk to him? The buyer? Yes, I said flatly. And guess what? He's already suspicious. The title doesn't match. Which means this is about to blow wide open. Dad's voice cracked. Sabrina, please, don't let it go that far. I didn't flinch. Then you're going to help me fix this. Tomorrow morning, James and I will call Donovan back. You'll be there. And you'll tell him exactly what you did. Mom shook her head, her voice climbing. You want us to admit to fraud? To a stranger? You already admitted it to me, I snapped. Now it's time you face the person you scammed. For once they didn't argue. Fear had a way of silencing even the boldest of denials. That night, back at James's apartment, we sat cross-legged on his couch with cartons of Thai food between us. But neither of us ate much. My phone was still buzzing from family messages, most of them my parents begging me not to ruin their lives, some of them my mother guilt-tripping me with lines like, "You'll regret this when we're gone," and "Family doesn't send family to jail." James snorted when I read them aloud. Family doesn't steal 30 grand either. They crossed the line. Stop letting them rewrite the story. I pressed my palms into my eyes. I know. It's so hard to turn off years of conditioning. The guilt. The pressure to be the strong one. He reached over, taking my hand. Then let me carry some of it with you. You're not alone in this anymore. This isn't just about your parents. It's about me too. They stole from me. And I won't let them wiggle out of it. I squeezed his hand back, grateful for his steadiness. The next morning, before we could even dial Donovan, my parents showed up at my apartment. They looked wrecked. Mom's hair was unbrushed, Dad's shirt wrinkled, both of them carrying the haunted eyes of people who hadn't slept. You have to help us, Mom begged the moment I opened the door. We can't eat, we can't breathe, Sabrina, please. We made a mistake, but you can't let this destroy us. I stood in the doorway, blocking their path. It's not up to me. You stole from James, not me. And he has every right to press charges. Dad's voice was hoarse. We'll pay him back. Every penny. I arched an eyebrow. With what? You said yourself money is tight. Kitchen renovations, the mortgage. We'll take out a loan, Dad insisted. A home equity line. Whatever it takes. James, standing behind me, stepped forward, his tone hard. That's the only option. Full repayment plus compensation for my time and stress. And it won't be a handshake deal. You'll sign a binding agreement. Otherwise, this goes to the police. Mom's face crumpled. A legal agreement? Between family? That's so cold. I laughed bitterly. Cold? You forged my signature. You sold James's car. You put us in this position. Don't talk to me about cold. Dad looked between us, defeated. Fine. We'll sign whatever you need. Just please, don't let this ruin us. I didn't soften. It already has. But if you're willing to do the work, maybe we can salvage what's left. Later that afternoon, we sat across from Alicia Ramirez, a criminal lawyer I trusted, who listened intently as we explained everything. She tapped her pen against her legal pad, then said bluntly, "If this goes to trial, your parents are facing multiple felonies. Prison is on the table. But if you'd prefer a civil solution, we can draft an agreement requiring repayment, restitution, and a notarized apology. That way, if they default, you still have grounds to sue." James nodded. "That's what I want." Mom and Dad exchanged terrified glances but didn't argue. They knew the alternative was far worse. When we left Alicia's office, James slipped his arm around me. "This is leverage. They'll finally learn that actions have consequences." I stared out at the city skyline, the weight of it all pressing down on me. "Yeah," I said softly. "But this is just the beginning. Heather doesn't even know yet. And when she comes home, she's going to find out the party's over." And deep down I knew that confrontation was going to tear the last veil off my family's dysfunction. Heather's voice was bright when she finally answered the satellite call from the ship, like she had stepped out of a travel commercial. I could hear the clinking of glasses in the background, a swell of music, laughter carried on sea air. "Bree, oh my God, why are you calling? I'm literally watching the sunset over the Mediterranean. Isn't it gorgeous?" I bit the inside of my cheek so hard it hurt. "Heather, do you have any idea what's happening back home?" She giggled, tipsy and carefree. "What, did Mom forget to water her azaleas again? Or is this about your precious car? Don't tell me you're still sulking." The word sliced through me. My precious car? That's what you think this is about. They sold something that wasn't theirs. They committed fraud. They could go to prison. Her laughter faltered, the music still blaring behind her. "Prison? Don't be ridiculous. They just sold a car. You can afford another one." "No, Heather," I said, my voice cold as ice. "They didn't sell mine. They sold James's. They forged my name. They faked documents. This isn't just a family spat. This is criminal." For a moment, silence. Then her tone sharpened, defensive. "Well, I didn't ask them to do that. I just told them I was sad I couldn't afford the cruise. That's not my fault." I let out a bitter laugh. "Not your fault? You've been manipulating them your whole life. You pout, you cry, you play the helpless little girl, and they bend until they break. And this time, Heather, they broke the law." Her voice wavered now, the first crack in her carefree facade. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying you need to come home. Get off at the next port. Book a flight. This mess is yours too, whether you like it or not. And you're going to face it with the rest of us." "But the cruise doesn't end for another week." I cut her off. "Then consider it over early. Actions have consequences. You've been shielded from that your whole life, but not anymore." There was another pause. Then a petulant sigh, like a child being told to clean her room. "Fine. I'll come back. But this isn't fair, Bree. You've always been jealous." "Jealous?" The word came out like a whip. "Do you honestly think I'm jealous of you right now? You're 24 years old, Heather. And the only reason you're sipping cocktails on a cruise ship is because Mom and Dad broke the law for you. I don't envy that. I pity it." I hung up before she could reply, my hand trembling with both rage and release. James, sitting beside me on his couch, reached for my hand. That wasn't easy, but it needed to be said. I nodded, blinking back hot tears. She'll never change if someone doesn't force her to see reality. And if Mom and Dad won't, then I will. The next day, Heather was back on U.S. soil, dragged home by the weight of reality. She stormed into my apartment, still smelling of suntan lotion and overpriced perfume, her sunglasses perched like armor. "This is insane," she announced before even sitting down. "Do you know how humiliating it was to leave early? Everyone on the ship thinks I'm broke now." "You are broke," I snapped. "And now, thanks to you, Mom and Dad are broke too. Because they had to take out loans, sell jewelry, and drain themselves dry just to fix what they did for you." Her eyes darted toward James, who was standing silently, arms folded. Why is he even here? Because you stole from him, I said flatly. You owe him. We all do. Heather scoffed, tossing her hair. I didn't steal anything. Yes, you did, James said finally, his voice calm but unyielding. Maybe not with your hands, but with your entitlement. You let them believe the world owed you, and when they decided to pay your tab with my car, you didn't care. That's theft too, Heather. Indirect or not. For once she had no comeback. We sat around the table that afternoon, me, James, my parents, and Heather, while Alicia slid documents across the surface. Agreements, repayment schedules, notarized apologies. My parents' hands shook as they signed. Heather sulked but added her contribution too. 10,000 pulled reluctantly from savings she swore she didn't have. When it was done, Alicia leaned back in her chair. Congratulations. You've avoided prison. For now. But let me make something clear. If any of you default, if any payment bounces, if you try to wiggle out of this in any way, James has every right to pursue full criminal charges. And I will personally make sure the DA sees this entire file. The room was so quiet you could hear the scratch of her pen as she capped it. For the first time, Mom didn't argue. Dad didn't defend. Heather didn't pout. And for the first time in my life, I felt the ground shift beneath us. Not in their favor, but in mine. Because finally, after years of favoritism, manipulation, and sacrifice, I wasn't the one cleaning up the mess. They were. And the balance of power? It was finally irrevocably mine. The first repayment came 2 weeks later. A wire transfer from my parents' new home equity loan. I saw the confirmation email with their bank's logo. A grim reminder of how deep they'd had to cut into their own stability, just to undo the disaster they created. The money went straight to James's account, where it belonged, but the damage in my family went deeper than any number on a screen. Heather had reluctantly moved 10,000 from her savings. She had done it with a sigh, dramatic enough for the whole neighborhood to hear. As if she were donating a kidney instead of returning stolen money. Even after she signed the paperwork, she stomped around the table like a child punished for breaking a vase. This is ridiculous, she muttered as she handed Alicia the receipt. I didn't even do anything. I didn't sign anything, I didn't sell anything. You're punishing me because Mom and Dad wanted to help me. I leaned forward, my voice quiet but sharp enough to slice the room in half. We're holding you accountable, Heather. There's a difference. You may not have signed the papers, but you benefited from the theft. You took a cruise you couldn't afford, knowing Mom and Dad always caved to you. This isn't just their crime. It's yours too, by proxy. Her eyes flashed, the familiar defiance rising. God, you've always hated me, Bree. Admit it. You can't stand that they love me more. That's what this is really about, isn't it? The words hung in the air, so toxic and naked that even Mom flinched. Dad's fork clattered against his plate, his hand shaking. For once, he didn't rush to soothe her. Is that what you think? I asked, my voice steady but laced with a hurt I couldn't disguise. That all of this, the years of me working myself raw, of being overlooked, of swallowing disappointment after disappointment, was because I'm jealous of you? Heather crossed her arms, defiant but uncertain. Well, you've never liked me. You've always acted like I'm spoiled. I let out a hollow laugh. Because you are. You've been spoiled so thoroughly you don't even know what accountability looks like. You think love means Mom and Dad emptying their pockets for you while I scrape for crumbs. You think favoritism is affection. But it's not. It's poison. And it's poisoned all of us. The silence that followed was heavy, charged. Mom opened her mouth, but Dad's voice cut across hers, low and trembling. She's right. We all turned to look at him. Dad sat hunched at the table, his face drawn, eyes fixed on the wood grain like he couldn't bear to meet anyone's gaze. Sabrina's right. We failed her. Failed both of you, really. We thought we were protecting Heather. We thought if we made her life easier, she'd have a head start. But all we did was cripple her. And we leaned on Sabrina's strength like it was endless. Like it cost her nothing. His voice cracked, raw in a way I had never heard before. It wasn't fair. To you, Bree. It was never fair. The word stunned me more than anger ever could have. My father, the man who had always shrugged, always looked the other way, always let Mom run interference, was finally saying what I had waited my whole life to hear. Mom's eyes filled with tears, but she said nothing. For once she didn't argue. She didn't defend. She just sat there, lips pressed thin, her silence more damning than any excuse. Heather blinked, unsettled, shifting in her chair. "Dad," she began, but he shook his head. "No. Enough. It's time we stop pretending this is about jealousy or sibling rivalry. We broke our family when we made everything bend around Heather's wants. And now it's bent so far it's nearly snapped." I swallowed hard, my throat thick. I had dreamed of this moment, of one of them finally admitting the truth, but hearing it didn't bring the relief I expected. Instead, it cracked something open inside me, a grief for years I could never get back. James reached under the table, his hand finding mine. His thumb brushed my knuckles, grounding me, reminding me I wasn't alone anymore. Heather slumped back, her defiance dimmed, though not extinguished. "So what now?" she muttered. I met her eyes steady. "Now? You grow up. You start living with the consequences of your choices. And you stop expecting everyone else to pay your way. Because the days of me being the family scapegoat, the fixer, the one who swallows every betrayal and smiles through it, those days are over." The words rang through the dining room like a verdict. And for the first time, no one argued. The weeks that followed felt strange, almost like walking through a house after a storm. Everything was still standing, but nothing was in the same place. My parents had begun paying James back through monthly installments, the equity loan bleeding them dry in a way that forced them to finally taste scarcity. Mom's diamond rings, once flaunted at every family gathering, were gone, sold to a jeweler downtown. Dad had taken on weekend construction work for the first time in decades, his hands blistered and raw. Heather, meanwhile, sulked like someone who had been dragged into adulthood, kicking and screaming. She resented the $10,000 she'd had to contribute and complained endlessly about her new entry-level job at an advertising agency. "I can barely cover my rent," she moaned one afternoon at dinner, stabbing at her salad like it had personally betrayed her. "And now I'm out all that money because you made me pay." "No, Heather," I said, my voice calm but firm. "You're out that money because you lived off everyone else's generosity for too long. You've been carried your whole life. That ends now." Her eyes narrowed. "You sound just like Dad lately. What did you do, brainwash him?" I raised an eyebrow. Or maybe he finally woke up. The tension at the table was thick, but for once Dad didn't step in to smooth it over. He let Heather stew in her anger, his silence louder than any lecture. A few days later, Heather showed up at my apartment uninvited. She barged in like she owned the place, tossing her purse on my couch. "We need to talk." I crossed my arms. "About what?" Her eyes glittered with something sharp. "About you. About how you've always hated me. You think you're so much better because you work 3 jobs in college, because you drive some old car like it's the crown jewels. But you're not better, Brie. You're bitter. You've always wanted what I had. Mom and Dad's love, their attention, their money. That's why you're doing all this. Not justice. Not accountability. Just jealousy." The words hit like acid, burning but not surprising. She had always wielded that accusation like a shield, a way to flip the narrative and paint me as the villain. But this time I didn't flinch. "You're right about one thing," I said evenly. "I did want Mom and Dad's love. I wanted them to see me, to be proud of me, to treat me like I mattered. But I never wanted what you had, Heather. Because what you had wasn't love, it was indulgence. It was poison dressed as affection. And it left you weak." Her face twisted, her mask cracking. "Weak? You think I'm weak?" I stepped closer, my voice dropping. "Yes. Because strength isn't being handed everything on a silver platter. Strength is earning it. Standing on your own 2 feet. You've never done that. And the sad thing is, you don't even know who you are without someone else footing the bill." Her eyes filled with tears. Angry ones, hot and fast. "You're cruel," she spat. "You sound just like those bullies in high school who called me spoiled. At least I didn't bury myself in work just to prove I was worth something." The jab landed, but instead of wounding me, it clarified everything. "You're right," I said softly. "I did bury myself in work. Because I knew no one else was going to save me. And you know what? I'm proud of that. I'm proud that everything I have I earned. That car? My car? It's more than metal and paint. It's proof that I didn't need anyone's permission to succeed." Heather stood frozen, trembling, her arms crossed tightly as if to hold herself together. You'll regret saying this to me one day. I tilted my head, meeting her gaze without blinking. No, Heather. The only regret I have is wasting so many years letting you, and Mom and Dad, convince me I was less. Those days are done. She grabbed her purse and stormed out, slamming the door so hard the frame rattled. James emerged from the kitchen where he'd been listening quietly, his face unreadable. That was brutal, he said softly. It was the truth, I replied, sinking onto the couch. My hands were trembling but my voice was steady. She needed to hear it. And I needed to say it. He sat beside me, slipping his arm around my shoulders. It's not easy cutting through years of family lies. But you're doing it. And whether she admits it or not, Heather heard you today. It'll stick. I wanted to believe him. But deep down I knew Heather wasn't done. Not by a long shot. And I was right. Because the very next day, she showed up at our parents' house with a new accusation. One that would rip open old wounds and force every buried truth into the light. The family meeting at my parents' house was supposed to be routine. Another check-in with Alicia's paperwork. Another round of signatures to confirm repayment was on schedule. James came with me, his calm presence a shield. I walked and braced for the usual tension. For Mom's forced politeness, Dad's silence, Heather's sulking. But what I didn't expect was the storm Heather carried with her. She arrived late, as always, sweeping into the dining room like she owned it. Her hair was messy, her eyes red, and she carried the sharp energy of someone ready to detonate. Before we start this stupid little meeting, she said, slamming her bag onto the table, I want to say something. Mom tried to soothe her immediately. Heather, sweetheart, maybe now isn't. No, Mom, Heather snapped, her voice cracking. I'm tired of being painted as the villain. I'm tired of everyone acting like I ruined everything. You want the truth? Fine. Here's the truth. She turned her eyes on me, blazing with fury. You were never the one they wanted, Sabrina. You were the accident. The mistake. They told me that when I was 12, told me how hard it was when Mom got pregnant with you, how they weren't ready, how everything got harder. You think they favored me because I was perfect? No. It's because you were the reminder of everything they didn't want. The words landed like a slap, cold and stinging. For a moment all I heard was the thud of my own heartbeat. I looked at Mom, searching for denial, for outrage, for some sign that Heather was lying. But her face. Oh God, her face. It wasn't shock. It was guilt. Pure naked guilt. My chest tightened. Is that true? I whispered. Dad closed his eyes, his hands trembling on the table. Sabrina, it's not. Don't you dare soften it. I snapped. Is it true? Mom's lips parted, but no sound came out. Tears welled in her eyes. Finally, she whispered. We were young. We weren't ready. You weren't planned. But it doesn't mean we didn't love you. My laugh was hollow, jagged. Love me? You spent my whole life proving otherwise. Favoring Heather. Belittling me. Dismissing my passions. Do you have any idea what it feels like to grow up in a house where you're the mistake that needs to be managed, while she's the miracle who gets everything? Heather folded her arms, smug in her cruelty. See? I told you. She can't handle the truth. But for once Dad didn't shield her. He slammed his fist on the table, startling everyone. Enough, Heather. His voice thundered through the room. This isn't about you anymore. You've had your mother defending you your whole life. And it's gotten us here broke, ashamed, drowning in debt because we couldn't say no to you. But this stops now. Heather's mouth fell open. Dad. No. His voice cracked with fury and something deeper, grief. You've taken, and we've let you. And Sabrina. He turned to me, his eyes wet, desperate. She was never a mistake. She was the one who held this family together. She was the strong one, the responsible one, the one who carried burdens no child should. We failed her. We failed both of you. And I can't undo the past, but I won't let you twist it anymore. The room was silent except for Mom's muffled sobs. I sat frozen, Heather's words echoing in my chest like poison. The accidental child. The unwanted one. But as Dad's words sank in, another truth settled over me like armor. I wasn't the mistake. I was the proof of their failure, yes, but also of my own resilience. I had built myself, carved myself from their neglect, forged myself in the fire of being overlooked. And that strength, my strength, was something Heather would never understand. I looked at her, steady, unwavering. You can throw every cruel word at me, Heather, but it doesn't change the truth. I earned everything I have. You can't say the same. Her eyes narrowed, her lips trembling with rage she couldn't articulate. For the first time she looked small. James slid his hand into mine under the table, anchoring me. My parents sat broken on either side of us, guilt and regret weighing heavy. And Heather? She was left with nothing but her own bitterness. For once, the balance of power wasn't in her favor. It was in mine. The confrontation left cracks in our family that no one could plaster over with false smiles. After Heather's revelation, the air at my parents' house felt heavier every time I walked through the door, as if the walls themselves knew we had outed a truth that was never meant to be spoken aloud. But life didn't pause to let us heal privately. Within weeks, my extended family caught wind of the car incident, as Mom tried to call it, minimizing the betrayal as if a Corvette were just a mislaid umbrella. Aunt Sylvia was the first to call me, her voice thick with indignation. Sabrina Marie, your mother is beside herself, threatening to send your own parents to jail over a car? Shame on you. It was the same refrain I'd been hearing all my life. You're strong. You should bend. You should give. You should be the one to absorb the blow. But this time I didn't bend. They didn't just sell a car, Aunt Sylvia. They committed fraud. They forged my signature. They sold James's property. Would you be so quick to defend them if it had been your son's car? Or would you call the police? She sputtered but didn't answer. I ended the call, shaking but proud. I had finally said what I should have said years ago. The test came soon after at a family barbecue hosted by Uncle George. He had always been closer to me than the others, Pop's brother, the only one who ever told me he admired my grit. Still, I knew this gathering was going to be a battlefield. Word had spread, and family gossip travels faster than wildfire. When James and I arrived, my Corvette gleaming in the driveway, heads turned. I felt the weight of their stares, the curiosity, the judgment, the whispered speculation. Mom and Dad hovered nervously by the grill, Heather scrolling on her phone with a scowl etched onto her face. Here she is, Aunt Sylvia muttered loudly enough for everyone to hear. The girl who'd rather humiliate her parents than forgive them. I clenched my jaw, but before I could reply, Uncle George stepped forward, his voice booming. Enough, Sylvia. Don't twist this. I know what happened. They stole from her. They committed crimes. And if Sabrina had pressed charges, she'd have one. The yard went silent. Eyes flicked from me to my parents to Heather. The whispers began in earnest. Mom wrung her hands, her voice small. We were just trying to help Heather. We didn't mean. Uncle George cut her off. Diana, intent doesn't erase action. You enabled Heather all her life, and now look where it's gotten you. Debt. Shame. And a daughter who's finally had enough. Heather slammed her phone down on the patio table. Oh please. Everyone needs to stop acting like I'm the problem. I didn't sell anything. I didn't forge anything. I'm the victim here. Do you know how humiliating it's been for me? My friends keep asking why I came back early from the cruise, and I can't even tell them without sounding pathetic. Victim. My laugh was sharp, cutting. Heather, you got a luxury vacation at the cost of our parents' integrity and James's property. You were sipping cocktails while we were cleaning up your mess. You're not the victim. You're the reason this happened. Her eyes burned with fury, her voice shrill. You've always been jealous. Admit it, Sabrina. You hate that Mom and Dad loved me more, that I got the attention, the gifts, the support. You've been waiting your whole life to get revenge. The crowd gasped at her words, the family drama spilling out like dirty laundry on the line. But I didn't shrink. Not anymore. I straightened, my voice steady. You're right. They did love you more. They gave you everything and gave me nothing. And that should have made you stronger, Heather. But instead it made you entitled. It made you selfish. And it left you unable to stand on your own. If this is love, I'd rather have had none of it. Because at least I learned how to survive. For once there was no comeback. Heather's face crumpled, and she stormed inside, slamming the sliding door. Silence settled over the yard. My parents stood frozen, faces pale, the truth echoing louder than Heather's tantrum. Uncle George broke the quiet. You see? That's what happens when you confuse favoritism with love. Sabrina may have been your mistake, but she's the only one here who learned how to carry her own weight. And you all should be ashamed. No one disagreed. Not this time. As the evening wore on, the gossip shifted. I heard whispers not about me being ungrateful, but about Heather's entitlement, about my parents' blind favoritism. The narrative was changing right there in the open. And for the first time, the shame wasn't mine to carry. The barbecue had shifted something. I felt it in the way the cousins looked at me differently, in the hushed voices that no longer framed me as the ungrateful one, but instead painted Heather and my parents as the architects of their own downfall. It should have been satisfying, vindicating even. But I knew my sister too well. Heather never lost quietly. Her retaliation came 3 days later. I was at work when my phone lit up with a barrage of messages. Coworkers pinged me links to a Facebook post that was spreading like wildfire through family and acquaintances alike. My stomach dropped as I clicked the link. It was Heather's post, a long venomous tirade that started with, "Some of you think you know the whole story about what's happening in my family, but you don't. My sister Sabrina has been trying to destroy our parents to get revenge for years of being jealous of me." She painted herself as the victim, me as a vindictive liar, and even dragged James into it, claiming he had manipulated me against the family. She accused me of being materialistic, heartless, and cold, the kind of person who would trade family for a car. The comments were pouring in. Sympathy from her friends, confusion from extended relatives, and a mix of people defending me or piling on. My hands trembled as I scrolled, my vision blurring with rage. By the time I got home that evening, James was waiting with takeout, his jaw clenched tight. "I saw it," he said without preamble. "She crossed a line." I sank onto the couch, my body shaking. "She's trying to ruin me. To make me the villain just like always." James knelt in front of me, taking my hands. "Let her try. Anyone who actually knows you won't believe her lies. And as for the rest, we fight back, but not with her tactics. We use the truth. Cold, hard truth." That night, for the first time in my life, I wrote my own story publicly. I drafted a post that laid everything bare. My years of working 3 jobs, my parents' favoritism, the forged documents, the fraudulent sale, the restitution they were paying. I attached scans of the notarized apology and the repayment agreement, blacking out account details but leaving the signatures clear. And then with my hands trembling, I hit post. The response was like a tidal wave. Within hours, dozens of relatives and old friends messaged me privately, some apologizing for ever doubting me, others stunned silent by the evidence. My post was calm, factual, but it carried the weight of years of silence breaking at once. Heather's version unraveled instantly. Her friends backtracked. The comments under her post turned brutal, demanding answers, receipts, proof she couldn't provide. Within a day, she deleted it. But the damage to her reputation lingered. Mom called me that evening, her voice shaky, half pleading, half scolding. "Sabrina, did you really have to put our private business out there for everyone to see?" "Yes," I said, my voice steady. "Because Heather made it public first. I'm not going to let her smear me with lies while you stand by in silence." Her sigh was weary. "You've embarrassed this family." I cut her off. "No, Mom. You embarrassed this family when you chose to commit fraud. Heather embarrassed this family when she tried to lie her way out of accountability. The only thing I did was refuse to carry your shame anymore." There was nothing but silence on the other end. For once, she had no comeback. That night, lying in bed beside James, I realized something. Heather's attack hadn't broken me. It had freed me. For the first time, I wasn't hiding the truth to protect anyone else. I wasn't shielding my parents or swallowing Heather's barbs, or pretending everything was fine. The world knew what happened, and the world knew I had survived it. But I also knew Heather wasn't finished. She had lost the public battle, yes, but she still had one card left to play, the card she always played when cornered. Desperation. And desperation, I suspected, would lead her to do something reckless. Heather didn't reach out right away. For a week there was silence. No texts, no calls, no online explosions. It was unnerving, like the stillness before a storm. I kept waiting for the other shoe to drop, and deep down I knew it would. It happened on a Friday evening. James and I were finishing dinner when my phone buzzed with a notification from my bank. A large transfer attempt had been flagged and blocked. My heart nearly stopped. I opened the app, my hands trembling, and there it was. Someone had tried to initiate a transfer of $18,000 from my account. It hadn't gone through, thanks to the security lock James had insisted we add months ago, but the attempt itself was like a punch to the gut. Who the hell would? I started, but then I froze. Because I already knew. Heather. She had always been reckless with money, always sure she could manipulate or bully her way out of consequences. But this wasn't just family betrayal. This was criminal. I immediately called the bank, filed a fraud report, and locked everything down. James, calm but furious, stood beside me the whole time. She's escalating, he said grimly when I hung up. She's cornered, and this is what people like her do. They lash out. I wanted to believe maybe I was wrong, maybe it wasn't her. But then 2 days later a letter came in the mail. No return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper, handwritten in Heather's slanted script. You think you've won, but you haven't. That money should have been mine. If you don't drop this crusade, I'll make sure Mom and Dad go down for everything. Do you really want that on your conscience? My hand shook as I held the letter. It wasn't just an admission, it was a threat. She was willing to drag our parents into prison time if I didn't play along. James read it over my shoulder, his jaw tightening. She just incriminated herself. This is blackmail. We can take this straight to the police. But my stomach twisted. Mom and Dad. For all their betrayal, for all the years of neglect, they were still my parents. If Heather pushed, if she really exposed the depth of their fraud to save herself, they wouldn't just be humiliated. They could face serious legal consequences. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, torn apart inside. My whole life I had been the one cleaning up after Heather, the one holding the line so the family didn't completely fall apart. Now here I was again, facing the same impossible choice. Protect them and lose myself, or protect myself and watch them fall. By morning, though, I knew something had shifted. I'm done, I whispered to James over coffee. I've been protecting them my entire life. Protecting Mom's pride. Protecting Dad's silence. Protecting Heather's lies. And where has it gotten me? Alone. Betrayed. Stolen from. Used. No more. James reached across the table, his eyes steady. So what do you want to do? I want to end it, I said, my voice firm for the first time. Legally. Permanently. I'll take that letter to the authorities. If Heather goes down, she goes down. If Mom and Dad get dragged into it too, then maybe that's the consequence they should have faced a long time ago. Saying it felt like ripping chains off my chest. But I also knew this would be the hardest move yet. Not just because it meant finally severing ties with Heather, but because it meant no longer seeing my parents as people I had to save. The next step was clear. I would take the letter, the fraud attempt, and every piece of evidence I had, and place it in the hands of the law. Heather wanted to play reckless? Fine. She wanted to threaten me with my parents' downfall? Then she would have to face the truth that they weren't my shield anymore. As I packed the folder of documents, James put a hand on my shoulder. This is it. After this, they can't touch you again. I nodded, my heart pounding. After this, I whispered, I'm free. But deep down I couldn't help but wonder. Once the storm broke, who would still be standing? The morning I walked into the police station with my folder of evidence, it felt like every step was weighted with decades of secrets. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, the air smelled faintly of coffee and disinfectant, and the officer at the desk looked up with the routine politeness of someone expecting a simple report. He had no idea that I was about to unravel an entire family's carefully hidden rot. I placed the folder on the counter. My voice barely wavered. I'd like to report attempted fraud, identity theft, and blackmail. His eyebrows rose slightly, but he nodded and guided me through the process. By the time I was sitting in the small interview room with a detective, I had laid out everything: the failed transfer from my account, the threatening letter, the long trail of manipulative texts, and the deeper story of how my family had stolen from me for years. The detective flipped through the pages, his expression tightening as he reached Heather's handwritten note. This is pretty damning, he said, holding up the letter with gloved fingers. It's direct evidence of intent and coercion. Combined with the attempted transfer, it's more than enough to open a formal case. A chill ran down my spine. This was real now. No going back. Do you want to press charges against your sister? He asked gently. I thought of Heather's smirk when she humiliated me at family gatherings, the way she had always twisted truth until I doubted myself, and the sheer gall of trying to steal from me even after everything. And then I thought of my parents, how they had watched, silent, complicit, sometimes even encouraging her. Yes, I said finally, my voice steady. I want to press charges. James was waiting in the car outside. When I slid into the passenger seat, I felt both lighter and heavier at once. Like I had just dropped a boulder I'd been carrying for years, but now had to face the earthquake it caused. They're opening a case, I told him. He reached for my hand and squeezed. Good. It's time she answers for what she's done. But Heather didn't wait quietly. By the next week, word had spread through the family. My phone lit up with calls from relatives I hadn't spoken to in years, some furious, some pleading. My aunt accused me of destroying the family's reputation. My cousin texted me late at night. I always knew Heather was dirty. Good for you for finally doing something. And then Mom called. Her voice was brittle, shaky, but her words carried the old, familiar guilt trip. Sabrina, how could you? Do you realize what this will do to us? To your father? To me? I closed my eyes, pain stabbing through me. Mom, Heather tried to steal from me. She threatened me. What do you expect me to do? Just roll over again. You don't understand, she whispered, her voice cracking. There are things you don't know. If the police dig too deep, it won't just be Heather who suffers. There it was. The admission. The unspoken truth I had always suspected. My parents weren't just innocent bystanders. They were tangled in the web too. Then maybe it's time you faced it, I said quietly. I'm done protecting everyone at my expense. The silence on the other end was long and heavy. Finally, she whispered. If this goes through, Sabrina, you'll have no family left. Tears burned my eyes, but I held firm. Then maybe I never really had one. When I hung up, my hands shook. But for the first time, I didn't feel like the scared little girl begging for scraps of love. I felt like someone who had taken back her power. Days later, the detective called with an update. Heather had been brought in for questioning. She had tried to bluster and deny, but the evidence, the digital trail of the failed bank transfer, the letter in her own handwriting, was too solid. And when she realized they might trace the money back to accounts connected to Mom and Dad, she broke. She's pointing fingers, the detective told me. Trying to cut a deal. If what she's saying is true, your parents may have been involved in other financial misconduct. We'll need to investigate further. I sat there in stunned silence, the weight of it all pressing down. It wasn't just Heather anymore. It was Mom. It was Dad. The people who were supposed to protect me had, all along, been building a house of lies on stolen foundations. James found me staring blankly at the wall when he came home that night. He knelt beside me, his hands firm on mine. This is the reckoning, Sabrina. It's ugly and it's painful, but it's the only way you'll ever be free. I nodded slowly, my throat tight. I know, but part of me still wishes it didn't have to come to this. He looked into my eyes, steady and unflinching. It always did. You just finally had the strength to see it through. And as the storm gathered around me, I realized something profound. I wasn't the victim anymore. I was the catalyst. The one who had finally pulled the mask off a family built on betrayal. The truth was coming, and this time it wouldn't be buried. The day the call came, I was sipping lukewarm tea at the kitchen table, staring out the window without really seeing anything. When the phone buzzed with the detective's number, my chest tightened, bracing for impact. Miss Turner, he began, his voice measured. We've concluded preliminary questioning with your sister. She's cooperating, at least selectively. She's named your parents in multiple schemes. Bank accounts, tax evasions, even misuse of inheritance funds that should have gone to you. I gripped the edge of the table so tightly my knuckles whitened. Inheritance. Yes, he continued. Your father received a substantial payout from your late grandfather's estate. According to the documents, half was intended for you once you turned 25. But Heather claims your parents funneled the money into shell accounts years ago, then told her to keep quiet. The words sliced through me like glass. My grandfather, my one ally in childhood, the man who used to sneak me peppermint candies and whisper, One day, Sabrina, you'll see how strong you are. He had left me a gift, and my parents had stolen it. They never intended for you to know, the detective said gently. But now it's evidence. We're moving forward with subpoenas. When I hung up, the world seemed quieter, like the air itself was holding its breath. James came into the kitchen, reading my face before I even spoke. It's worse, isn't it? They stole Grandpa's inheritance. Money meant for me, I whispered. His jaw clenched. Sabrina, this isn't just about Heather anymore. This is your parents' empire of lies crumbling. I nodded, but a storm of conflicting emotions swirled inside me. Part of me wanted them punished. Part of me wanted to scream and demand why. But mostly, I felt a hollow ache, like the last remnants of the family I'd clung to had turned to ash. The weeks that followed were chaos. Subpoenas went out. My parents' accounts were frozen. Their polished reputation in the community began to crack. Neighbors whispered. Old business partners withdrew. The mask of respectability they had worn for decades started to slip, piece by piece. And Heather, oh, Heather wasn't silent. She had taken to messaging me. Long ranting texts filled with venom and desperation. You don't understand, they made me do it. I'll never forgive you for betraying us. You've destroyed this family, hope you're happy. I never replied. Every word from her felt like a viper trying to sink its fangs into me. But then came the call I never expected. Mom. Her voice cracked like thin ice. Sabrina, we need to talk. I almost hung up. But some part of me, maybe the wounded child still craving answers, stayed silent long enough to hear her out. They're painting us like criminals, she said, a sob choking her throat. The police, the papers, it's all spiraling. But you don't understand, we had no choice. No choice. I hissed. You had a choice every time you lied. Every time you let Heather tear me down. Every time you stole what was mine and told me I was worthless. Her silence was deafening. Then softly she admitted, your father, he started it. The accounts. The inheritance. I went along because I was scared of losing everything. Scared of him. And Heather, she learned from us. She learned to survive by taking. The admission twisted in my chest. It wasn't remorse. It was self-preservation disguised as confession. You could have chosen me, I said, my voice breaking. But you never did. She wept then, but I didn't comfort her. Not anymore. By the time the case reached court, the picture was clear. Heather had cut a deal, offering testimony in exchange for reduced charges. She sat on the witness stand, her eyes darting like a cornered animal, detailing how Mom and Dad had orchestrated years of quiet fraud and manipulation. I sat in the back watching. My parents looked smaller than I had ever seen them. Dad's broad shoulders slumped, Mom's face pale and hollow. For the first time, they weren't in control. And when the prosecutor revealed the paper trail, the stolen inheritance, the falsified transfers, the offshore accounts, I felt both vindicated and devastated. The judge's words rang in the courtroom like a final bell. This family has engaged in a pattern of deceit, theft, and coercion that cannot be ignored. Sentencing will reflect the gravity of these actions. As gavel struck wood, I realized something final had happened. My family as I had known it, broken though it was gone forever. That night, James and I walked along the quiet street outside the courthouse. The city lights shimmered, distant and cold. You should feel proud, he said softly. You did what no one else could. I nodded, but tears stung my eyes. I thought exposing them would feel like victory. But it just feels empty. James wrapped his arm around me. That's because justice isn't about joy. It's about truth. And the truth is, you're free now. For the first time, I allowed myself to believe it. The courthouse smelled faintly of paper, varnish, and cold metal when I stepped inside for the final hearing. My heels clicked against the marble floor, each sound echoing like a heartbeat. This was the day, the end of years of silence, years of swallowing pain, years of letting them define me. James squeezed my hand as we took our seats near the back. No matter what happens, this doesn't change who you are now, he whispered. I nodded, though my throat was tight. The truth was, I didn't know how I would feel when the gavel finally fell. The courtroom filled slowly, reporters hunched over their notepads, neighbors whispering in hushed tones. My parents entered flanked by attorneys. Dad's hair, once a proud salt and pepper mane, looked flat and dull. Mom's hands trembled as she clutched her purse, eyes darting around like a lost child. And then came Heather. She wore a plain gray suit, her once flawless hair tied back with none of its former gloss. She didn't look at me. She didn't look at anyone. When the judge entered, the room stilled. Today we deliver sentencing for Mr. and Mrs. Turner and Heather Turner in relation to charges of fraud, embezzlement, and inheritance misappropriation. His voice was firm, every syllable carrying the weight of finality. He read through the charges one by one, each like a hammer against the bones of my past. Fraud, theft, coercion. Heather's name was mentioned last. Her cooperation had spared her the harshest penalty. In recognition of her testimony, the judge said, Heather Turner will serve 3 years probation, mandatory restitution, and community service. Mr. and Mrs. Turner, however, he paused, and you could feel the collective breath of the room tighten. You are sentenced to 5 years federal prison, with restitution of the stolen inheritance ordered in full. A gasp rippled across the courtroom. Mom sobbed into her hands. Dad's jaw locked, his pride shattering in real time. I just sat still, numb. Afterward, outside in the gray afternoon light, I saw Heather waiting by the courthouse steps. For a moment I thought of walking past her. But then, maybe for closure, maybe for courage, I walked toward her. She looked at me finally. Her eyes, once sharp and venomous, were rimmed with exhaustion. Are you happy now? She asked, her voice low. I studied her, the sister who had mocked me, stolen from me, lied to me. And all I felt was empty sorrow. No, I said honestly. There's no happiness in any of this. But there's freedom. Her lips parted, maybe to lash out, maybe to plead. But I lifted my hand, stopping her. You made your choices, Heather. Just like they did. And I made mine. I'm done living under the weight of what you all did to me. I forgive you. I saw her eyes widen, almost hopeful. But I'll never forget. And I'll never let you hurt me again. She flinched as if the words were a slap. But they were the truth. And the truth was finally mine. That night, James and I drove to the cabin my grandfather once owned. The place I'd inherited at last, after years of lies. The key turned smoothly in the lock, and when I stepped inside, the air smelled faintly of cedar and dust, like time had been waiting for me. I walked across the wooden floorboards, my hand grazing the worn furniture. In the corner sat the old rocking chair my grandfather loved. For a moment I swore I could hear his voice again. One day, Sabrina, you'll see how strong you are. Tears filled my eyes, but this time they weren't from pain. James wrapped his arms around me from behind, resting his chin on my shoulder. This is yours now. Not because of them, but because you fought for it. I leaned into him, my heart finally lighter. No, James. It's not just the cabin. It's my life. My voice. My future. It's all mine again. Outside, the stars began to pierce the night sky, brighter than I'd seen in years. And for the first time since childhood, I felt whole. I had survived the betrayal. I had faced the lies. And I had walked away, not broken but unbreakable. This was not just an ending. This was the beginning of me.